Hello and welcome to part 2 of the 1 in 100 year flood with Zara Peppers. This is Flood City. See, I sort of changed up the order I said that stuff. Anyways, so things are getting pretty serious. The flood wall for the most populated area of the city is in the process of failing. And the thing is there's a low section to this area, so the water could spill through here, and this whole area down here is essentially a big bowl. If I bring up the terrain view, you can see that there is a decrease in the height of this area. So if that water keeps going down that way, it could flood out this entire area. So things are looking pretty serious. I don't know what predictions you guys were making, but you're getting an idea of what this situation is like. The flood wall for this area has failed. The old Somers home is flooded out yet again. I don't think it's going to survive this one. This area is more flooded than it's ever been before, with the flood wall failing, bypassing it, going around, as is the same with this area, but it's also overflowing the flood wall. And it's getting quite deep, at least up to, a quarter up most cars, or half, pretty much almost covering this car right here. What else? This area, the Murphy district, is flooded out quite severely in the coast areas. At the moment, half of it is flooded out. The Oran Spillway is diverting a lot of water down here. However, it hasn't been enough. So I'm sure it's a lot making it better than it would have otherwise been, but this is just a kind of capacity that it wasn't really built for. We also have quite a bit of water going down the Orlando Spillway and the creek. It looks like water levels have gone down a bit here. I think this area may be safe. It may just be overflowing a little bit. And the spillway may be helping because it's diverting a lot of this water down around this area. So I think the spillway is doing its job quite nicely. And if it wasn't for it, this would be a lot worse than it is. However, we do have a few little areas that are flooded out right here. If we go up to the north, you can see how severe this flooding is. It has overflown the banks for quite a ways. Like, this area is completely underwater. It's at least, I'm not sure what, let's say it's quite a bit wider than it originally was before. And that extends into the housing areas. The dikes have been completely inundated with water. This dike, the only dike that's held so far, has been the flood wall protecting the old city. And other than that, this one has failed. This one has failed. This one, it's still protecting up here where the land is a bit higher than it is. It's pretty low. This is one of the lowest areas in the city, making it hard to protect, whereas over here it's not quite as low, other than this little area right here that always gets flooded, and there's no real point in protecting it because it's just a little touristy thing. It's sort of on the edge. It is working. The spillway is diverting this water down the spillway and preventing it from going too much from going into this area, which is the most vulnerable area in the city. It was overflowing a little while ago, but I do think that the Orlando spillway is helping quite a bit. Now let's take a look at our citizens. It seems like everybody is still alive. Let me double check the list. Yes, no one has died yet, but let's take a look at everybody's houses, see if anyone's flooded out. Orlando Summer seems fine. Where does he live? The Belmont residence. His house is okay. Master Chief. His house is pretty safe down there. Awesomeness, retired at home, pretty safe. Bob Teague, where are you? Pretty safe down there. Richard McDowell, pretty safe. Well, actually, Richard McDowell is pretty close to the flooding, so we'll have to keep an eye on him. This is Sean Gambrell's house right here. So he is in a precarious place at the moment. Probably the most threatened house in the city right now. Oh, we've got Nate Wilson. Your house is flooded out right now. So we'll have to see. Where are you right now anyways? At work? Nate Wilson, you are studying at the elementary school at the moment, which is also pretty close to the flooding. So Nate Wilson, your house is pretty in a bad position. It's just on the edge of the flooding right now. Nate Wilson house. Just so I remember. So fingers crossed for you. Other than Nate Wilson, Sean Gambrell is in a pretty precarious place over here. Everybody else is pretty safe. Well, things continue to get worse here in Flood City. The Cherry District is completely flooded out. This entire area is completely underwater. This is the worst that it has ever seen. This area is not quite as bad, but the flooding has flooded out almost a block of that area. The Lake Hills District, where the Omar Somers home was, now it's abandoned, so that's the end of the Somers home. Actually kind of a sad day. That was a house that I always remembered, and now it's gone to be replaced with another. But this area is a block and a half is flooded out down here in the Lake Hills and Forest District. Over here, waters are still within safe levels from flooding out one of our newest areas in the city. Down here in the Orchard Park District is pretty all right. The old city is more than safe. It's only about a quarter of the way up the flood wall protecting that area. The tourist district has started to flood. It has gone across the park and bike path area and has started to flood into the tourist district. This area, the Orchard Square, Vermont Heights have some flooding. About a quarter of the area is flooded. Nate Wilson is getting pretty close to being flooded out. Which house is his? Oh, no, not Nate Wilson. Is it Nate Wilson? No. It was... Who was... Oh, yeah, it was Sean Gambrell. His house is right here. Gammy. Let's call him the Gammy house. Your house is just on the edge. As for Nate Wilson, his house is still flooded out. Not too badly, but if it stays that way, he will... Well, he probably won't die because I think he's at school right now, but he will have to move out of the city. You know, I wish there was a mechanic where you could evacuate people from the city. I think that would be pretty cool. The flooding has gone into the most populated district in the city and is getting pretty close to Richard McDowell's apartment block. Nate Wilson seems to have moved, but his house is still flooded out over here. It's just getting worse and worse. This area is under serious threat. It may flood off of the Insane River. Oh, I guess I can make these operational again to start collecting garbage. The Lake Hills and Forest Square districts are almost completely flooded out. The Somers home is 100% covered in water. The area that has been always been flooded is now completely flooded out. The tourist district has some moderate flooding, has gone down a little bit here. The Southern Tourist District Park is completely flooded out. Orchard Square still flooded out, not much has changed. A bit more is flooded out here. The Asinine River is rising quite a bit. Wow, that area is really flooded out. Oh, why do I have it on? Oh no, I didn't have it on pause. Those trains are just stuck. Oh right, I guess we no longer have train service to the south of the city because this train track is underwater. How's this one? This line's still open. Water continues to move further into the Lyndale district, getting pretty close to Richard McDowell's apartment blocks. And the water is quite high. It's completely over flooded this dike. I'm pretty sure that the spillway is preventing it from getting worse than it is because it is diverting quite a bit of that water south into the creek and then dumping it down here. But it just isn't enough. You know, if there's any modders out there, I would like a way to be able to place something like sandbags. Because that would be... I think about this whole flood series is I want to keep it as realistic as possible. Don't want crazy tsunamis washing over everything. I want to keep it as realistic as possible. I suppose if I were doing that, I might not be able to make flood walls, but I could use the terrain modification tool to make slight dikes, because that's realistic. I mean, I remember in the 1997 flood in Winnipeg, I lived there at the time, the city was threatened by floodwaters. The city of Winnipeg basically has a gigantic flood diversion. It's a man-made channel that goes all the way around the city, and there's a gate, what they call the floodway gate, that raises and only lets a certain amount of water into the Rouge River, see the connection? And diverts the wet rest around the city so that, it saved the city in that flood. But it threatened to back up in another river and come in the city from another way. So they had to build a huge dike system, which they use school buses, junk cars. The army came in. It was known as the Brunk Hill Dike or the Zed Dike. And it pretty much saved the city. So I suppose doing something like that would be realistic. But I don't really see where I could do something like that at the moment. I'll have to think about that. I've thought about trying to make something like the floodway, but the only problem is in City Skylines, there isn't really a way to make a gate, because it requires a gate that lets some water into the river, but diverts most of it around the city. If I remember to, I'll put up a picture of the floodway and the floodway gate right here. Well, the floodwaters seem to have crested, so what I'm going to do now is get rid of the sources. That doesn't mean the flood's going to go away right away, and it could get worse. Many times when I delete those sources, it does get worse, but right now I'm shutting off the extra water sources, and we'll see what happens and ultimately in the end what the damage is going to be like. Just as a sit rep for what kind of damage, we seem to have lost about a quarter of Murphy Park. We've lost the entirety of the Cherry District. We've lost pretty much three-fourths of the Lake Kills District, pretty good portion of of Forest Square, some of the Tourist District, or Briarwood Park and Manor Heights, about a quarter of Orchard Square and Vermont Heights. We've lost a portion of Lyndale, about, let's say, a quarter of Lyndale. And that seems to be the extent of it. seems like the Sean Gambrel residence has gotten off without being flooded. Nate Wilson, his house is still flooded, but not abandoned yet. But that probably will happen soon. So, yeah, it's getting pretty serious. So, I'm sorry, Nate. Where are you right now, Nate? You're at home. You're in that house right now. I'm sorry to say you're probably gonna die. But we'll remember you. We will remember you. Well, Nate Wilson, you've been pretty lucky. Seems like your family has moved again into a house that isn't flooded. However, it's completely surrounded by water. Who do you all live with? Where are you, Nate Wilson? I guess you have a family. Man, sure is a lot of people in that little house. 7 apartments in that? I'm not quite sure how the realism is working there. And it seems like you may not be drowning in water, but you are drowning in garbage. The flooding does keep getting worse in this area. It has moved up at 2 blocks, almost to the main street going through this area. Far further than it ever has gone before. And the main problems are the flood wall here being flooded over and it getting into this area from the spillway. This area is still absolutely, completely flooded out, except for Nate Wilson's house and this guy who's probably being burgled right now. Sean Gambrel's house is still... Oh, actually... Well, it's not flooded. His house isn't flooded, but his neighbors' houses are flooded. And some of the street. So it's pretty close. Oh, yeah, he's flooded out. Sean Gambrel is now... His house is flooded. Will he be able to hold out until the floodwaters start to recede? Blah, blah. The Operation Lancer Memorial has finally come up from beneath the water. And it's left in complete devastation. All the trees are dead. The zoo's still there, but it's filled with garbage and, criminals and stuff. Firehouse is all right. But yeah, here it's gone back down to about, flood levels 0.72 around there. So the waters are starting to recede. Next, it'll be this area that will get a second breath. And you can see here the way the ground is. That is how far the water went up. That's a pretty serious increase in water levels for this flood. The worst the city has ever seen. Floodwaters have gone down in these districts, the Murphy district, and it has left a whole bunch, dozens of abandoned houses along the riverfront. However, most of the neighborhood has gotten off scot-free, so I suppose this is probably one of the luckier neighborhoods in the city. It is starting to go down in the Cherry district, but it does have a ways to go. And Lake Hills and Forest Square it's still going up. It's almost reached the main street, well into the commercial district. This area, geez, that's ridiculous. This area has never seen flooding like this before. It's pretty much up to the main street in this area, flooding out tons of commercial spaces and must be at least 100 houses. Richard McDowell seems to have gotten lucky. His apartment's actually pretty high. There's a pretty steep road here that goes up, so I think he'll be all right. But it has flooded out a pretty big part of the Lindale district. The old city is perfectly fine. The tourist district did see a little bit of flooding, but nothing has gone abandoned. And water levels, the park is still completely flooded out, and all these houses are completely flooded out. But it is starting to go down here now. Water levels have gone back down to normal here. By the way, just for future reference with the citizen things, you don't have to like ask me to be a citizen. In fact, I'd say just comment on the video, and I take random commentators and I'll add them to the city. So as long as you comment, that's cool. You don't need to ask because you know it's a bit crazy now with all the requests for citizens. So just leave a comment and I might choose you just for future reference. Again, I would like to say that I've uploaded this map with the instructions on how to use it and what mods that you'll require onto the Steam Workshop. You can find it. It's called Pepper's Flood Map, and then you can download it, and with the proper mods, you can make your own flood city, your own flood defenses, and flood it out as you see fit. I am working on making a collection of all the mods that I have so I can link it to you people in the description, but I have no idea how to do that. I keep linking my subscribe content, but it just leads people to their own subscriptions. So if you know how to do that, please let me know in the comments, because I like to be able to share all my mods with you people, because you seem to... My cat's meowing at me. Simba. One issue is the land value is going to be severely affected by this whole thing, making this area pretty much worthless and some of the area around it, along with this area, including Richard McDowell's house, which now has land value that's too low. Actually, is that Richard McDowell's house? Richard McDowell, where are you? Richard McDowell. Oh no, he moved. Richard McDowell moved into probably the worst area in the city he could possibly have been in. That's your new house, Richard McDowell. Well, that's nice. Better than an apartment block. Now, let's see. Nate Wilson. How'd he fare? Still living in that house, and it seems like he's... I think everybody has survived this flood. Even Bob Teague, who's now 87 years old. Yeah, everyone's made it through. Lucky. Well, since we have some industrial demand, I'm going to sort of rebuild. I don't remember why I tore this area down, but I'm going to rebuild the farming land over here. Let's take a look at the Operation Lancer Memorial, which is now back down to normal levels. And the trees are starting to grow back. Things are starting to go back to normal. But you can still see the line of where the flood has gone pretty high. That's pretty impressive. Many abandoned houses over here. There will be a ton of abandoned buildings over here, both commercial and residential. Seems to have stopped just short of getting to the main street in this area. The worst affected area in the city, Lake Hills and Forest Square, in the Cherry District, I guess. My one concern right now is health, whether areas that are inaccessible to ambulances are going to start getting sick people, which will then start to spread throughout the city. So I'm keeping an eye open for that. Seems like things are all right at the moment. I don't have any red buildings on my health thing, so hopefully that won't be an issue. Electricity is all right. Water availability is all right. Duh. Happiness is not great in some areas, but well, I'm sure all the people that were in the abandoned houses are pretty unhappy about this whole situation. So it seems like water levels have gone back down to normal in most areas of the city. I have deleted 2 parts of this flood wall to allow water to drain back into the river from this neighborhood. Although that doesn't seem to be working here. Oh, there we go. So hopefully that area will empty out. This one will just have to empty out in good time. Let's see, the Somers home is no more. How sad. Well, I've got sad news. I thought he made it through, but Nate Wilson, at 14 years old, has passed away. His last activity was visiting the hospital, so I assume he died instead of moved away. Not quite sure how he died, but he died nonetheless. So, Nate Wilson, it was nice having you as part of Flood City. Well, the floodwaters have gone back down to normal for the most part, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. This was the most damaging flood we've ever had in Flood City, and of course, this isn't even the worst. The 1 in 500 Flood City will be even worse than this, so there is going to have to be a lot of preparation for that flood. Hopefully, it won't be as devastating as it could be with current flood defenses. So, I guess this is where we're going to end it for today. That was the 1 in 100 year flood burp. And next time, well, we'll be going into a new flood cycle. So until then, good night or good day or whatever it is where you are right now.